It was an early morning. The alarm kept going off, until he reached out to it and began to search for it, before finally turning it off. While brushing his teeth, our protagonist was still feeling sleepy. It was a day like many. The boy rushed to school while his mother urged him to have breakfast first. Yet he declined while exiting the house, claiming that he didn't have time for it. Our hero then spent his day at school, studying and focusing on his classes, before finally returning home in the evening. The protagonist then enjoyed some food while watching a stream, where the star of the show claimed that he had psychic powers. Like any other student, our hero would end his day with a late-night snack. This was the life of the protagonist, who was just a normal boy. Yet there was more to this life than it seemed. Someone suddenly saw the boy. He felt startled as a toweringly tall acquaintance approached him, claiming that he was just on his mind. As the hero began to fear the worst, the tall one claimed that he was hungry. This was none other than Choi Cheon-min, who threatened to beat up the protagonist if he didn't buy him food. This bully disrupted the peaceful life of our hero. Later on, the young man was savagely thrown into the wall. The bully firmly stated that his lackey should always do his homework for him, while threatening him and delivering a savage beating. Just like that, the frail protagonist fell to his knees. Choi Cheon-min and his friends were really entertained by the suffering of the one who panted. Yet one of them claimed that they should stop it or risk ending his life. The tall one continued mocking the boy while slapping him on the head, making the frail hero apologize. The harasser claimed that he didn't need him to be sorry, but to do his homework, demanding him to only leave the school once he sent a picture of it being done. With that, the two others decided to join in, claiming that he should hurry up in order to finish their homework as well. The protagonist was left beaten up in the toilet, feeling great pain coursing through his body. Back then, when he got hit by a rock, he fell to the ground as his blood began to cover the gray concrete. Those passing by were left horrified. As a small child, the protagonist got into a huge accident that he was now unable to recall. Even so, he made a miraculous recovery and avoided a certain death. Yet due to this tragedy, he began to suffer from regular cardiac and respiratory problems. His mother, who was the only supporter he had, was forced to shoulder her child alone. And despite his condition getting worse by the day, through the continuous effort of his mother, the boy was nursed back to health and managed to have a normal life. This regular life was only possible at home, as our hero was forced to be labeled as a special case everywhere else. Due to his condition, he became an easy prey for boys. The normality that the boy enjoyed while being a middle schooler suddenly disappeared in high school. And just like that, his normal routine was turned into a tormenting cycle. After many efforts, the homework was finally done. Our hero was baffled by the fact that he had finished all of them in time. With the photo finally sent to the bully, the young man could finally take a break. Yet while sitting alone with his thoughts in complete silence, he began to grow frustrated. The boy began to think about his miserable life and when luck would finally be on his side once again. Yet while lost in his thoughts, he was suddenly startled by his phone that began to ring. Our hero was left confused, as he was not expecting any calls. He was now being contacted by a mysterious number. The curious young man then picked up the phone, thinking that it was the bully. Yet he was unable to understand what the caller was saying. He quickly assumed that it was the tall one, and immediately claimed that he had finished the homework and sent the picture. Just then, someone called him by his name. A chill began to run down the young one's spine as an ominous voice claimed that he should listen to it in order to remain alive. The mysterious caller then asked him to go to the principal's office once the school went dark, and only come out when he hears silence. He was told that he shouldn't go home or ask for help of any kind, but had to look for the hotel he would see in a window, as it would be his only way to escape death. With that being said, the conversation was put to an end. This left Ha-on-bith rather annoyed as he assumed it was a bad prank made with a voice filter, and so the young man decided to head back home as there was no reason left to remain in the school, when suddenly everything went dark. With the lights now off, our hero was left intrigued. He assumed that the power was cut off for a drill testing. After placing the lock on, the hungry Ha-on-bith wondered if he should buy himself a cup of ramen before returning home. Yet while thinking about the delicious meal, he suddenly spotted two figures. They casually passed by him. As he watched the two of them disappear into the darkness without saying a word, the young man began to think of how scary these individuals were. He assumed that they were thugs from outside the school. Ha-on-bith, who had his doubts about these two, wondered if he should just go alert security. Yet he decided to drop the matter and head home quietly. Only then did he realize that his classroom was the only thing present in the hallway that these two took. But as the young man went to check it out, wondering if they were truly here for him, he suddenly found himself right in front of the two horrifying presences. The boy found himself sweating bullets and immobilized as he was greeted with creepy eyes and terrifying wide smiles. One of the two men immediately recognized the protagonist as Ha-on-bith and claimed that they had been searching for him for a long time. The man also stated that he was here to see if the boy had the item they required according to their intel. Ha-on-bith claimed with a shaking voice that he didn't have anything that could pique their interest. When suddenly, the unexpected happened. The hero began to cough out blood after getting impaled by the taller one's hand. And just like that, he fell to the ground as the madman claimed that he must be in possession of the item. The one in the white coat claimed that the boy was lying and that he certainly had the unique item they desired with him. The man then affirmed that what he was after was present, the high schooler's heart, before pulling out the young man's heart from his chest with a mad smile, claiming that he had finally found what he was longing for. When suddenly he opened his eyes, our horrified protagonist finally woke up and found himself inside the classroom. He quickly checked his body to see if he had any injuries, still horrified by what he had experienced. Ha-on-bith then began to laugh, relieved that this scenario was but a nightmare. With that being said, he quickly recomposed himself and decided to head back home, only for a sudden ring to make a chill run down his spine. The horrified hero then turned his head to find someone calling him, leaving him baffled, as it was an unknown number, just like in his dream. This left Ha-on-bith terrified, fearing to re-experience this hellish dream. As the phone rang once again, the young man was left terrified. The number from his dream was now calling him in real life. With that, the young one decided to act quickly and dashed with all of his might in order to check the view outside. Everything seemed calm, everything seemed at peace. Seeing how no danger was inside, our hero, who felt relieved, crumbled to the ground while laughing about his own superstition. But even so, seeing how reality was close to the dream, he still had his doubts. Ha-on-bith picked up the phone and urged the silent caller to respond. He asked the other side of the call time and time again to answer him, even threatening to end the call. Yet upon being called by his name, the hero confirmed that it was him, and before he could even utter a word, the mysterious voice immediately urged him to flee the school and escape the scene as the two attackers were getting closer, leaving our hero in a state of panic. The voice tried to instruct the young man on what he should do in order to escape, yet some interference made it impossible for him to understand the message. Ha-on-bith asked the mysterious one to repeat what he said, only for the communication to be cut off. The young man was left bewildered as he had received ominous instructions without being given any explanation whatsoever. With that being said, he decided to leave the school immediately. Suddenly the lights went out. With that, the boy was left horrified and began to run as fast as possible, seeing how he was now living his nightmare, meaning that the two monsters would arrive soon. Yet while running, he was struck with a sudden pain that made him trip on the stairs and fall painfully to the ground. The suffering Ha-on-bith tried his best to get up, as he cursed his weakened heart that was about to abandon him in this desperate situation. Suddenly, his attention was captured by the sudden sound of footsteps, seeing how the source of the sound was slowly getting closer, and as two shadows appeared at the end of the hallway, the young man, who desperately tried to escape, began to panic. He rushed to search for a place to hide. Here again, he looked everywhere for the perfect spot, until finally, they found an open door. Upon seeing this, the boy decided to act quickly. Shortly after, two maniacs arrived at the scene. With wide smiles that amidness, the men were searching for the young boy. Meanwhile, the protagonist tried his best to hold his breath as the two killers passed by his hiding spot. The high schooler was terrified of the probability of being discovered. As the two men began to get further from him, the boy started to wait for the right moment. And just as the killers exited the hallway, our hero decided to seize the opportunity. He dashed forward with all of his might. The target was finally outside of the school, and yet he kept running as fast as possible in order to get away from the mortal danger, until he finally arrived and opened the door. And just like that, the high schooler finally regained his home. The exhausted Ha-on-bith was sweating bullets. This experience was so intense that it made him fall to his knees. He was amazed by the fact that he had escaped death. He was also stunned by the fact that his dream had come to reality, seeing how he truly found himself being chased by merciless killers. Ha-on-bith had a hard time processing the recent events and the reasons behind their unfolding. Yet he decided to shake this off for another time and contact his mother immediately. Only then was he startled by a sudden voice. The voice claimed that it had been waiting for the protagonist for a long time, and just like that, a masked presence appeared in the room. The protagonist was startled and decided to confront the stranger. The man presented himself as an assassin from the Saviors of Light known as Parrot. He then claimed that the boy was in possession of an object that his organization deeply desired. The horrified young man tried to play dumb, yet Parrot affirmed that he knew very well which object he was referring to. The assassin claimed that he was here for the item inside the protagonist's heart, claiming it to be the gun. The boy was unable to understand what was happening, as the assassin was surprised by the fact that the storage box was, in fact, a little boy, which was a mark of the unpredictability of a certain group. He then gave the target the choice to either hand him the item or let him take it himself. He claimed that he was okay with both options. Yet, to the shock of Parrot, the boy seemed confused as he asked him if he was talking about an actual firearm. Ha-on-Bith, who was in a state of panic, claimed that a teenager had no reason for carrying a revolver and that the man was trespassing in his home. This is why he threatened to call the authorities if the man didn't leave. Only then did the assassin quickly close the distance and hit the boy with such strength that he sent him flying into the wall. With that being said, how are you ready to play? The killer then began to ask him some personal questions about his preferences, before affirming that he wasn't here to converse about such trivial matters. Parrot, who was certain that the protagonist was trying to play the fool, urged him to give him the item at once. With that being said, he struck the boy's hand with a knife as he ordered him to hand over the gun. Our hero was left in great pain. Ha-on-Bith began to beg for his life, swearing that he had no idea what item the man was talking about before begging for mercy once again. Upon seeing this, the confused man burst out laughing, as the storage box truly had no idea about the treasure inside it. With that being said, he resorted to his powers in order to telekinetically pull out the kitchen knives. This startled the high schooler, as he was witnessing levitating blades. With that being said, Parrot decided to extract the gun himself, as the knives were about to puncture the flesh of the young man. The baffled hero began to pray for a savior, when suddenly an unexpected intervention occurred. Just like that, blood was shed. In the calm of the darkness, the red began to stain the floor. The savior our hero prayed for came just in time, and it was none other than his mother. The woman quickly checked on her child, in order to see if he was hurt. Yet as his mother fell to the ground, the boy was left horrified. Our hero had a hard time understanding the situation, as he now had his injured mother in his arms. The lady then urged her son to flee the scene immediately. Yet the devastated boy refused to leave her behind and was determined to get her to a doctor. The assassin recognized the woman as the one guarding the holder of the gun. He playfully pointed out how she arrived at the right moment, claiming it to be the best moment of his spectacle. Seeing how an intruder entered the scene, the man decided to cut straight to the chase. At that moment, the storage box decided to give the one with the mask the item that he desired, in exchange for letting him get his mom to a doctor. At that moment, the woman slipped something into the pocket of her child, and just as our hero began to beg for his mother's life, the woman suddenly tackled the assassin, launching him into the wall with all of her might. Yet the assassin decided to resort to his power, in order to inflict even more damage before claiming that the actions of the lady were pointless. Despite the pain she was going through, the mother kept herself together and activated her ability. This startled the assassin as he was unable to believe the power that was being resorted to. In the end, the lady apologized to her child for keeping him in the dark, claiming that it was for his own safety. Yet she asked him to always remember how she would always love him, no matter what. And so, after the appearance of a great light, a horrifying explosion occurred. Just like that, the street was covered with rubble and fire. All was in shambles. All was destroyed. Until finally, a figure emerged from the rubble. This was none other than our hero, who was in a pretty bad state. He was unable to comprehend what happened to his mother, and how she sacrificed herself for his sake. And so, the orphaned young man found himself with tears in his eyes. The devastated boy began to cry while wondering about this atrocity, until he finally broke down, as no sin of his deserved such misery. The young man found this fate unjust and began to beg for it to be but a dream. Yet as he kept on crying his misery, something began to move not far away. The boy, who quickly noticed this, was left horrified. The rock then cracked before shattering to pieces. From the smoke, the man emerged pleased, claiming that he should have amputated the limbs of the woman, seeing how she managed to combine auto-destruction and anti-human binding. The assassin claimed that it all went to smoke when he tried to enjoy himself. He then added that he was left unsatisfied, seeing how he was being cheated on. With that being said, he decided to resume his hunt for the storage box. Meanwhile, the young man tried his best to escape, running as fast as possible while cursing this situation. Unable to comprehend the ridiculous fact of how it is the result of a certain firearm present in his chest, the young man knew that no one would believe him if he ever told about all the paranormal that he had witnessed. Our desperate hero, who was unable to think straight, found his mind clouded. At that moment, he had the idea of running towards the police station, where he would certainly receive protection regardless of his story. Only then did he remember the words of the mysterious voice. After recalling this, he began to slow down, before finally stopping. Our hero recalled how he was told to not ask anyone for help and head towards the window where a hotel could be witnessed in order to survive. The protagonist began to think of the call, and how it gave him wise advice in order to escape the first two smiling killers. At that moment of panic, our hero couldn't think clearly. Yet upon reviewing the facts, he realized that he only escaped after acting exactly how he was told to. This made him realize that he would be in danger if he went to the police station. The young man then began to wonder about the mentioned window where a hotel could be witnessed, as such description fits thousands of places, leaving the storage box with no apparent hint that would lead him to safety. Yet at that moment, the assassin arrived at the scene and quickly located his prey, leaving the boy horrified. The boy's entire body began to tremble with fear. He immediately began to beg for his life, but upon stepping into water, he suddenly looked down and found himself in front of an intriguing reflection. This left him quite baffled. The protagonist finally realized, as the mysterious message wasn't referring to an actual window where the building of a hotel could be seen, but a place where the reflection of the word hotel could be seen on windows. And seeing how he just read the word hotel in an inverted reflection, our hero quickly realized that it was the safe spot mentioned in the phone call. But at that moment, the assassin charged at him. The high schooler was left horrified, and so he turned towards the entrance of the building and decided to act quickly, running as fast as possible inside and climbing the stairs as fast as possible. The young man was terrified seeing how the assassin was drawing closer. Our hero, who didn't know what he should do next, decided to follow the orders of the call and head towards this window, praying that something there would save him. As he drew closer to the room he was headed to, he grew more and more certain that some kind of salvation awaited behind the door. Yet upon arriving, he was left stunned by a horrifying emptiness. At that moment, he was suddenly pierced from behind. Our hero was now injured and immediately fell to the ground. The young man felt himself in a pool of his own blood. The one in pain even struggled to breathe as life was slowly fleeing from his veins. The assassin asked him if he took pleasure in the chase, but our hero, who was on the brink of death, began to beg for a savior. The assassin claimed that he didn't need anybody else around him. Before asking the boy if he disliked him for being one of the sad clowns or if it was due to the painful deaths he was inflicting upon him, the mad one then affirmed that their last interaction should be filled with happiness as he asked his victim to smile, as sadness would look ugly on his corpse while going for the final step. He couldn't believe it, and just as the blade was about to puncture his flesh, he begged for a savior one last time. Suddenly, two new figures barged through the wall and burst into the scene. The confused assassin was left baffled. Out here, he opened his eyes and found a mysterious girl with a lollipop in her mouth and a gun in her hand. She then asked the clown to leave, before bracing herself, and immediately shooting the assassin, who dodged the bullet at the last second. Seeing how right before the bullet could hit him in the mask, the killer used some kind of small barrier to counter it. This one grew entertained to see the two of them arrive at the scene, and claimed that they would be powerless in this situation, before presenting his excuses, seeing how he arrived before them. But at that moment, the one with stone arms charged at him, and punched him with enough strength to send him flying far away through many walls. With the assassin out of sight, the girl took a moment to analyze the situation. Before rushing to the protagonist, she tried to awaken the unconscious boy, only to quickly realize that he had been inflicted with a lethal wound in the chest area. The older one urged the young Jin So-yul to retreat at once, only for her to affirm that she needed to apply first aid. So he asked her to hurry up as the assassin could break free from his powers at any time now. Only then did the man feel alarmed, and dodged a quick projectile at the last second. This left the one with stone arms alerted, as the enemy charged at him. The assassin had gained the upper ground and launched himself at the man in the suit with his levitating limbs. He then asked him not to think deeply about the way he broke free of the spell, seeing how he would be reduced into a pile of flesh very soon, before unleashing the noise and engaging with the opponent. After knocking the man with the stone arms a few feet away, the killer grabbed his dagger and combined his skills and powers to throw the weapon with an unpredictable trajectory that the man blocked at the last instant. Yet this little sneak attack left him wide open. Shortly after, the man of stone found himself kicked to the ground by the assassin, with such power that it sent him flying into the wall. The entertained clown claimed that kicking his weak and soft opponent relaxed his feet, before turning to the girl and claiming that she had no right to touch the protagonist. But at that moment, the partner of the assassin quickly got up and charged at the clown once again, forcing him to block his attack. The power demonstrated by the man managed to firmly plant the feet of the assassin into the ground. He then began to mark the excess and for his lame one-liner, and mocked him for not finding the right words. The clown began to laugh. Jin So-yul was baffled by this reaction. As the fight began to quickly escalate, the clown claimed that he was facing a terrifying opponent and asked to be more scary. The girl was left alone away as the assassin took pleasure in this fight and even demanded more violence. With that, she talked to wake up the protagonist one more time, and so he opened his eyes while still being in pain. The girl immediately introduced herself to the voice, claiming that she was from the Black Shadows who wanted to rescue him and that she was the mysterious caller. When asked about the black child, those were also here for the weapon inside his chest. Jin So-yul denied, claiming that they were here to shield it, and that she arrived right in time to give him the necessary treatment, as any more delay would have put him in a dangerous situation before asking for his help. Jin So-yul explained to him how there is a protective shield around his heart called a limiter that suppresses the power of the gun. Yet this protective shield that allowed him to live normally has been destroyed by Parrot. With that, she firmly urged him to cling to his sanity in order to prevent himself from being absorbed by the gun, claiming that it was the only way to remain alive. Jin So-yul also asked him to only think positive thoughts, as negativity makes the mind susceptible to the power of the gun, before stating that he should focus on his internal conflict and leave the rescue mission to them. But the boy, who was out of breath as usual, struggled to reply, when suddenly he stopped struggling. The rescuer found herself quite shocked, as the rescuee had now passed out, and so she screamed to her partner Tae-duk for help. Upon taking a look at her, the man's mind quickly understood what she expected from him. And so, to the shock of the clown, he distanced himself suddenly, before bracing himself and smashing the floor with all of his might. The attack was so powerful that it almost blew the assassin away. After the shockwave reached its end, a hole had appeared inside the floor. Upon noticing it, the killer was left intrigued, as this hole went down numerous floors, so he quickly jumped in it while thinking of how his opponents pretended to attack in order to flee underground and escape. He also began to think of how, even if they had a way to escape, it would be impossible as the Shadows, who had an injured young man with them, were too slow, meaning that choosing to escape underground was, in fact, a lethal mistake. Shortly after the killer landed upon arriving, he was left quite shocked, as the enemy was nowhere to be seen. And just as he began to think of how it would be impossible for the slow Shadows to outrun him, the killer finally realized, and looked to her starting point with shock, unable to believe the maneuver that his enemies had just used against him. As Tae-duk wasn't, in fact, trying to make an escape route, but a smokescreen instead meant to blind them, allowing the girl to use her powers, which finally made him realize that his enemies had never escaped by going through the lower floors. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, Jin So-yul, Tae-duk, and the unconscious protagonist had finally exited the building. The man claimed that they were now in the clear, and so he proposed to go to the midpoint in order to rejoin with Ji-hyun as planned and erase their tracks, seeing how they had much time ahead, only for his partner to correct him and affirm that they were racing against the clock, as the hero was in critical condition, where he could succumb to his injuries at any moment. The one with stone arms tried to argue that not taking the right steps would allow the assassin and the other enemies to track them down, which would either put them in danger or cause a delay, meaning that the original plan was the safest option. Jin So-yul reminded him that their mission was to get the high schooler to safety, meaning that they had to take the risky plan, as his death would mean failure. She urged him to shut up and hurry, seeing how they would be going for the escape point right away. Back then, a gift was presented. It was a gift given by the mother of her protagonist to her younger child, who was eager to see what was inside the box, and so they quickly tried to open it, and found inside it a rather intriguing item. The lady explained to him how this was a locket pendant which the child was clueless about, and so she opened the item, and explained how it was a necklace that would allow him to store things inside while showing him a picture of them that she placed in. Ha-on-bith asked her if the beautiful gift was truly meant for him, which she confirmed. The mother wanted her child to give her his word. She explained how this gift of hers had special powers, which is why she asked him to promise her to never put the amulet around his neck after receiving it. With that being said, the lady asked the little boy if she could trust his word. Back to the present, the girl tried to call Jung-ju Haeon, and affirmed to him that they had secured the target. The other side of the line explained to Jin So-yul how he was at the midpoint where everything had been set in place. But upon hearing that some issues forced them to go straight to the escape point, he demanded an explanation, only for the lady to claim that she didn't have the luxury to spare time for a conversation, and so he decided to join them there. Jin So-yul informed Tae-duk that the rabbit hole of their colleague would allow them to escape to safety, even if they were discovered, meaning that they had to head for Ji-yoon building, which was within the range of Ju-hyun's ability. The task of the two partners was now to make it alive to the building. At that moment, the oldest of the two realized that something was off. Seeing how they hadn't encountered any opponents up until now, he assumed that this must be some kind of ruse. He needed to be quickly tackled by his junior, who urged him to stop attracting bad luck, and praised her for her hard work instead, threatening to beat him up if he had attracted any problems. At that moment, she quickly noticed something alarming, and pushed her partner away with her feet, urging him to evade. Just like that, the two of them dodged a quick projectile at the last moment, something so powerful that it destroyed a small chunk of the rooftop. Upon seeing that the projectile was a bullet coated in Lete, Taeduk realized that they were now facing a sniper. Jin So-yul was once left greatly annoyed by her partner, who attracted bad luck while using her skill detection. The ability of the lady covered a wide area, allowing her to perceive every living soul nearby until finally she was able to detect. This one quickly reloaded, surprised to have witnessed both of his targets dodging his shot. With that being said, he decided to give it a second try, which didn't escape the lady, who urged herself to drag her senior to safety by the tie. 4 bullets had been fired rapidly using the power of the sniper. None of the 4 shots managed to hit one of our heroes. Just as the hitman was reloading his gun, Jin So-yul informed her stony senior that they would charge at floor 4 once she said 3. But the man found this to be too long. At that very moment, the sniper made his move, and so the girl shouted the magic word, allowing them to jump off the building at the right moment to escape a powerful shot. With that being said, the 3 of them began to fall, headfirst towards the glass on the 4th floor. Just like that, the 3 heroes entered the next building. The sniper quickly reloaded his rifle and aimed at his enemy, only to be left baffled. The man was particularly annoyed as his targets managed to escape, so he contacted the doctor and apologized to him, informing him of his failure and making excuses about it. The sniper then informed the 2 men in white of the enemy's location and asked them to confront them. Meanwhile, Taeduk, who was annoyed by the fact that the enemy appeared when he was talking about him, began to wonder if the escape point had been compromised, only for his partner to claim that due to the enemy's position, they could assume that they were just tracking the boy, which is why they saw them. This relieved the senior, who realized that the fact that they had been uncovered meant that another enemy would soon appear. Jin So-yul affirmed that they had been lucky until now and that they could now allow themselves to take another route as they had been running uninterrupted for so long. Only then did the girl notice that something was wrong. She quickly turned around and found the young boy shaking. Upon seeing this, the girl urged the young man to stay in his right mind. Only then did she realize that he wasn't only shaking, and that his eyes had turned pitch black before beginning to cry obsidian tears. Upon seeing this, Jin So-yul realized that they were now in a tough position. She then shocked him by informing him that the gun had begun consuming the protagonist's consciousness, and that if left uninterrupted, the consumption would make the boy blow up in a short time. Meanwhile, inside Ha-on-bith's mind, our hero Tony began to regain his consciousness. At that moment, he opened his eyes widely while being startled. He quickly stood up from his desk. Our hero, who was out of breath as always, was left confused. Just as he began to wonder about his current situation, he mysteriously found himself back in class with his teacher and peers. At that moment, the young man had no idea what was going to happen, and so he began to panic. Back in the real world, the senior demanded that his junior enlighten him on the condition of the boy, so she explained that despite not knowing much either, according to the words of their leader, the gun known as Dead Star always tries to control its wielder, and that despite the gun being sealed now, if it was suddenly unbound, all would go for the worst, as the wielder of the weapon would be affected by the energy it radiates, rendering them asleep in the deepest part of their mind. At that moment, someone called out to our protagonist and savagely smacked him in the back of the head. The aggressor was calling out the young man for attracting the teacher's attention by waking up. Inside the deepest part of the mind, one will be confronted with their worst fear that they desperately tried to run from. If the host of the Dead Star loses his life inside the nightmare, he would die in real life as his body would be overfilled with energy, ultimately making him explode. Taeduk realized that the boy was now a ticking time bomb that would go off if he failed to conquer his fear. The man refused to just wait until the boy detonated himself and decided to declare this mission a failure and fall back, only for the girl to claim that she would find a solution. According to Jin So-yul, despite the gun being sealed, the boy should have been exposed to it before, so there must be a failsafe, seeing how he had survived this long. With that being said, she began to scan his body, looking for any meaningful symbol or object that could stop the process. Only then did she notice something coming out. To the senior's surprise, the junior claimed that the solution must be present inside the necklace. Yet upon seeing this, the one with stone arms couldn't find the reason in those words. The girl claimed that she was just as clueless as him, yet assumed that it could wake up the protagonist, seeing how it had a small amount of Lete inside it. Taeduk claimed that this was just positive delusion, only for his partner to assert that it must be it, as a normal boy had a Lete item on him. So he agreed to proceed with her madness, claiming that they would surely meet their demise if the boy hadn't woken up by the time they entered the rabbit hole. And just as the man began to warn about what should be done in case he hadn't woken up by the time they reached their destination, she urged him to shut up, as she knew how to do her job. At that moment, the two of them felt alerted as something suddenly moved. They looked above only to see two shadows hovering over their heads. And so, after a powerful landing, our heroes found themselves in front of a giant cloud of smoke. The one who caused it immediately pointed out the simplicity of a certain someone and called out the black shadows for treating an injured man as such. And so, the doctor who had just arrived affirmed that he couldn't sleep on such an injustice. Claiming the protagonist to be one of his patients, he promised the black shadows not to harm them if they gently gave his patient back to him, before promising some irreversible damage in case they refused to cooperate. Back in the mind of the boy, where he had been slammed into his desk, making him fall to the ground in pain, our hero was then grabbed by the collar. He tried to admit his mistake and apologize, only to be quickly ignored and punched in the face. The hate was so powerful that it made him fly through the desks inside the classroom. The bully was satisfied with a smirk, while the bullied one found himself in great pain. At that moment, another harasser decided to join. Ha-on-Bith begged for mercy, claiming that he would be better from now on, only to be mercilessly punched in the face. The bully didn't want to hear any of it, and proceeded to repeatedly slam the protagonist while asking her if she was aware of the reason behind all of this. And so I lifted him by the hair and asked him to realize that he was being humiliated in public, before asking him if he was aware of the reason behind no one intervening. And so when the young boy with tears in his eyes asked about it, the bully affirmed to him in whispers that it was due to him being worthless, and someone who is completely useless and only complains, before firmly kicking him in the face and affirming that no one wanted to be in his presence. He then kept on stomping on the victim, claiming that his life, a long frail body, was worthless and a liability to all. With that, the bully urged his victim, whom he deemed worthless, to disappear, claiming that no one shall miss him, before giving him the ultimate kick in this call. The hit was so powerful that it made the necklace of the boy detach itself from his neck. Just like that, blood was scattered in the classroom. As he and the boy fell to the ground, unable to move, the boy began to think, and couldn't help but find a reason in the harsh words of the tall one, as his weakened heart would always forbid him from completing his tasks, forcing someone else to do them on his behalf. And despite people being kind at first, no one was patient enough to support his weakness in the long term. Our hero lived like this all of his life, deeming himself useless due to his forever damaged heart. And so, he found death to be a sweeter fate than the pitiful life he was leading. But just as he was about to give up struggling, a purple light appeared on the ground. It was a violet flame burning something. This intrigued our hero, as it was a picture of him and his mother inside the locket. Looking at this baffled our hero as he was witnessing the precious item fading to the wind like ash. The men in white then claimed that the critical state of the boy was something good, seeing how he risked exploding and annihilating a large area, and stated that he could take the gun out of the boy in order to remove the risk before urging them to make a choice. Jin Soyul claimed that she didn't expect those in white to be this smart. She then proceeded to use her power on a grenade in order to turn it invisible, and threw it as she made a gesture to shoo them away. The doctor was blown away by the cruelty of the Black Shadow, and just as he claimed that he would now be engaging in the hard way, he noticed the grenade appearing out of thin air right in front of his face. With that, the girl gave her senior the signal to escape. As the grenade finally exploded, the result of the sneak attack was a mad laughter coming from the target. The doctor, who was protected by his partner, was very pleased by how crafty the female shadow was, and so he decided to resort to his companion, Skull, before giving him the signal to move. Meanwhile, inside the dream of the boy where he was getting beaten up, the attacker stomped him on the face one more time. The bully smothered him and compared the boy who clung to life to a cockroach. With that being said, the main harasser pointed out how the protagonist himself was rebuked by his own existence, claiming that he was forced to contribute to society, seeing how he was a human being, and so he tossed a weapon to the ground, stating that the only way for our hero to be useful was to take his own life. The bully even claimed that this task was so simple that even the protagonist could accomplish it. Back to the real world, the girl tried to contact her ally, who had almost arrived at the meeting point, so she informed him how she was now near June's building, and affirmed that someone was after them, which is why she urged him to hurry up in order to open the rabbit hole. But at that moment, Jin Soyul was interrupted by the attack of Skull, who managed to catch up to them. The girl immediately pulled out her gun, trying to shoot him down in order to fight back. Yet by doing so, she left herself wide open for the doctor, who managed to sneak up behind her. The man then summoned his scalpel before unleashing a devastating wave of slashes known as incision that our heroes struggled to evade and parry. The fight was slowly escalating to the top of the building, and at that moment, the Black Shadows entered one of the floors by breaking through a window. Ju Heian was now conscious of the position of his allies and demanded 30 seconds in order to perceive. Taduk began to complain about this time limit that he always gave for the creation of the crucial rabbit hole, and as he kept on complaining, he suddenly cracked the wall, before completely annihilating it, to the horror of our heroes. They turned around only to find a chunk of the building missing. The doctor and Skull managed to catch up to the Black Shadows. The men in white were particularly annoyed by them. Thus, he unleashed his ability known as doping in order to prevent them from escaping, making many needles fly into the air, and one by one, puncture the veiny parts of Skull. With that, the kitchen began to transform, as his own bones came out, ripping through his flesh and skin. Just like that, battle simulation was activated. The doctor, who was greatly annoyed by this turn of events, decided to terminate all of his enemies at once as he unleashed his creature at them. Our heroes watched in horror. The girl couldn't believe it, seeing how they were now in a tough situation. Back to the nightmare of our hero. The bullies urged him to take his life at once, claiming it to be very simple, and that he should just hurry it up. At that moment, Ha-On-Bith tried to speak, yet he struggled to let the words come out between his short breaths. Back to reality, the senior informed the junior that they couldn't afford to wait anymore, only for her to state that they should just have a little more patience. Yet he declined, claiming that it was now their only chance to get rid of the Black Star. Tae-Duke asked her to do what was necessary while he bought her time until the escape exit appeared. At that moment, our hero began to tremble once again, making the girl fear the worst. Inside the dream, the imaginary harasser slapped the hero for not even being able to take his own life, and so he grabbed the blade on the ground. At the same time, a gun had been pointed at the head of our hero by his supposed savior, who began to pray for him to wake up. Otherwise, he would have no choice but to terminate his life. The bully then praised the hero for keeping up his pitiful existence for so long, before going for the final blow. Back to the 2 versus 2. The man with arms of stone was slowly losing ground, yet in his struggle, he spotted the escape opening, and so he informed his partner that they could now escape and that he was unable to buy her any more time. Seeing how they couldn't wait any longer, the girl now had her hands tied. At that moment, the hand of the stabber was grabbed, leaving him quite baffled. Ha-On-Bith began to fight back, stating that he had promised his mother to never put the locket around his neck, and in any case, if he found himself wearing it or its picture slowly burning, he would certainly not be present in the real world. And so, upon realizing that he was inside a dream, he decided to punch back the tall one with all of his might, sending him flying and knocking him out cold while making him lose a tooth. Just like that, the protagonist conquered his greatest fear. At that very moment, the hand of the hero that was trembling suddenly stopped, leaving the lady who noticed that quite surprised. Jin So-Yul found herself unable to believe her own eyes. Certainly, a great shock occurred right next to her, caused by none other than Skull, who was unleashing quite devastating power. He began to overpower the one with stone arms. At that very moment, a great explosion occurred inside of Jun's building. At that moment of confusion, our hero was grabbed by the shirt and dragged into the rabbit hole with the invisible curl and the one with stone arms. Without, our hero began to fall, still as unconscious as ever, until finally he woke up startled. Ha-On-Bith, who was out of breath, immediately got up, being terrified, only to find himself inside the hospital bed. Upon analyzing his surroundings, he began to wonder about his whereabouts, seeing how he woke up in a weird place. The terrified young boy had a hard time remembering the life training events that recently occurred after the end of classes, only that he noticed something near him. Upon taking a look at the pendant next to him, the same locket given to him by his mother, he suddenly recalled how the clown went for the gun inside his heart, and how his mother placed her life on the line in order to save him, to the point where she sacrificed herself for his sake. Upon remembering this, tears began to fill the eyes of the young man, and so he watched out of the room, determined to escape as fast as possible. The young man wanted to keep on living for the sake of his mother's sacrifice, when suddenly he bumped into someone. The imposing person turned around and called out the frail boy on the ground for his presence here in a menacing tone. This greatly terrified the confused one, who immediately began to run away as fast as possible, leaving Tae-Duke quite shocked. Only then did Ha-On-Bith stumble upon another menacing presence. Someone was complaining about their missing food. The angry swordsman was determined to find the culprit. The terrified young man denied the idea of him touching the food, but as the swordsman noticed the toothpick inside his colleague's mouth, a third someone arrived on the scene, happy to see them getting to know each other. This one claimed that he was here to wake up the protagonist, before introducing himself as Baek Mu-young, the head of the Black Shadows, before presenting the swordsman known as Blue and the 2 other members. Our hero was left shocked as the 2 men began to fight over the missing food. As the leader slowly approached him, he exclaimed in a frail and shaking voice that he was just a normal boy who needed to be somewhere else, only to be handed some kind of weird cube. Upon being asked to draw out the gun by Baek Mu-young, our traumatized protagonist was left quite shocked. According to the leader, it was a simple task that consisted of firmly holding the item and imagining it transforming into the weapon. The mention of the item inside his chest reminded the boy of the assassin, and so he tried to play clueless, claiming to be a normal high schooler. But as he kept on pretending, the head of the Black Shadows was called Blue. After a quick demonstration of power, the swordsman suddenly appeared behind the protagonist and ordered him in a menacing tone to draw out his weapon. Claiming that the boy had until the count of 3, leaving him quite confused, Ha'an Bith tried to settle things with words, only for the countdown to begin. The crying protagonist claimed that he had never seen a real gun and swore that he was telling the truth. Yet Blue kept on counting as he slowly began to draw out his blade. With that being said, our hero had no choice but to comply. The traumatized boy then firmly grabbed the cube and began to beg for it to turn into a weapon. Yet seeing how there was no result, Blue took a deep breath before finishing the count and charging at the young man. At that moment, some kind of black power emerged. Something suddenly appeared inside the hand of the protagonist, which startled the swordsman. With that, a great blast of power occurred, startling them both. And just like that, a horrifying beam of dark energy was unleashed, leaving a horrifying hole in the rooftop, and a swordsman who miraculously managed to avoid harm. Upon seeing this, the shocked young man fell from his feet. He was still unable to believe the fact that he was now holding the rumored gun. The leader jokingly claimed that the boy had betrayed his oath, before pointing out that he didn't expect the situation to be this critical and that they would have been in a tough situation if they had proceeded later. When suddenly the gun was aimed at Baek Moo Young, its terrified wielder demanded that everyone stay away from him. The startled Jin So-yul urged him to put the gun away. Han Bith began to cry his heart out, swearing that he just knew about the weapon and was a total ignorant, and demanded to know the reason behind this torture. Tae-duk tried to reassure the protagonist by claiming that the swordsman didn't mean him any harm, only for the boy to affirm that he wasn't a moron, seeing how Blue just pointed his blade at him. Seeing how the hero was begging to be released, the leader decided to reveal to him about his dying condition. This left the young man very much baffled as he demanded an explanation. According to Baek Moo Young, our hero's gun was some kind of parasite that feeds off the host's energy. And while this weapon would try to support a strong wielder, it would refuse any weak one and consume him in order to try and control him. Ha'an Bith managed to avoid the worst due to the power of his locket pendant. But seeing how its abilities were limited, if nothing is done in 15 days, the boy who fails to control the weapon would become its pawn and suffer a horrifying death. Ha'an Bith, who was shocked by the ugly truth, claimed it to be all light while waving the gun all around. But as he shouted that he shouldn't meet his end in such a way, the leader grabbed the gun and made it disappear, revealing how happy he was to see that the boy still had the will to live. The boss then claimed that they would assist the protagonist in conquering the weapon, urging him to follow in silence in order to survive, that they wouldn't get to enjoy a proper lunch, so he shouldn't leave immediately. A negative emotion caused by the hero's brain. As he was now living a life he didn't choose but was forced to embrace, he began to think of how powerless he was to change the past, and compared himself to this coffee, which couldn't be replaced back in the cup after being spilled. Later on at lunch, he asked his new friends what they should do next. While the golem and the swordsman began to argue over food, the hero pointed out that he should have this parasite allergically removed from his body, yet the girl affirmed that the gun was too clean, and that the best option would be to accept it. The leader claimed that our protagonist had 3 things he needed to be taught, with the first and second being training on the level of the brain and the body. He would also need to be taught about Lete, which is the origin of every energy. The boss even claimed that they should start right away, leaving the protagonist quite confused. Shortly after, our heroes took a bullet train. Our hero began to talk to his mother about how he managed to get an acquaintance to help him take care of the funeral, and that despite the deep grief he felt, he couldn't cry, as it would be too dangerous to go to her grave. He began to think of how he had escaped death by a hair. According to Jin So-yul, his attackers were a group with the ironic name of Saviors of Light. They are a group of mentally ill criminals who commit many and various types of atrocities. The Saviors of Light are a secret organization with an unknown motive. All members were labeled as criminals, yet each one of them was unique in his own way. This confused the boy, seeing how the police still hadn't intervened. Such a cruel organization would surely make the news, yet it was the first time our hero had ever heard of them. So Blue explained how the members of the Saviors of Light were all Lete users. This confused the young man, which is why the swordsman explained to him how every existent object and being possessed its own energy known as Lete, and those with the power to control it were known as Lete users. The term refers to the goddess of oblivion, which fits it well, seeing how very few people noticed it, and even fewer could learn to control it. Lete manipulation would allow one to exceed the borders of humanity, and even gain extraordinary abilities similar to fiction. And seeing how all members of the enemy group could manipulate this energy, they would use their powers to erase traces and memories, making it impossible for the common folk to recognize their existence, and very difficult for the government to track them down. This left our hero baffled as he realized that the clown who controlled knives wasn't some unique individual, which the girl found ironic, as this was said by the one with a parasite. Shortly after, the leader unlocked the door, proposing to end this discussion and enter the room. Entering this apartment confused the young man, seeing how the others mentioned going to the base. Only then did he realize as the room suddenly began to change, and just like that, the young man who entered a small room was baffled to see himself in a totally different location. That was the way to the HQ. This greatly confused him, as it didn't make any sense. Taeduk asked him to get used to his new daily experience while his junior placed the young man into the care of their leader, as they would now be hitting the road. Baek Mu-young then asked the young man if he wanted to come with him to do the stuff he had to make. He then checked up on the feelings of the young one. With sadness in his eyes, he claimed that he was getting better. The young man then asked how he should address his superior, reminding him that he had joined their team, which is why he asked him to make himself at home. The leader then asked the new recruit if he was familiar with the law of the Red Queen. Yet the protagonist affirmed to him how clueless he was. So the main explained to him how this law was derived from a fairy tale, where everything moved forward with the Red Queen in order to survive, and compared the current state of the protagonist to this story. As the unleashed gun tried to unleash its power and consume the user, it meant that the user himself had to gain power in order to keep his life. Yet this wasn't the main issue. The dead star kept getting out of control, trying to consume its host if it ever stopped growing, needing our hero in an endless cycle. With that, the leader informed the trainee of how hellish his training would be, and asked him if he had any reason to cling to life by enduring such torment. After thinking about this, the stuttering young boy decided to ask for the reason behind the deadly parasite being present inside his heart. The leader only grinned, cracking a soft smile as he claimed that no one knows for sure. The young man, Chuck, affirmed that when his mother asked them to shield her child, she explained the entire situation to him. Despite the many questions he had to ask, the communication had been cut short. Baek Mu-young affirmed that with the passing of his mother, the boy would have to live on in order to discover the truth he longed for. The leader then stated that he didn't have any more intel to reveal to the boy. So, after thinking for a short moment, Ha-on-bith firmly clenched his fist, affirming that due to this situation, he wasn't allowed to lose his life. He would have to live a daily life of pain due to the weapon, and despite his mother supporting him until now, which was the reason behind his survival, he began to wonder about her lies regarding the accident and the life he had been leading. This was why he felt hatred towards his lying mother for the first time ever, and yet he didn't want her memory to die along with him. Thus, our hero was now more determined than ever to live until he discovered the reason behind his mother concealing the powerful weapon inside his heart. Upon hearing this, the leader couldn't help but smile. He then affirmed to the young man that he understood what he meant before grabbing his hand and placing it on the handle, affirming that he should hold it well in order to survive. Before the boy could even process what was happening, the train suddenly began to move. Our hero had a hard time remaining on his feet, as the train had been knocked off the rails. After going up a few feet into the air, the heavy vehicle then began to fall back onto the ground, crashing with great force onto the rails. This turn of events detached one of the wagons, which then kept on falling, until it finally shattered at the bottom. It was only a matter of time before the rest of the train followed its first wagon. Seeing how there was nothing left to stand on anymore, the young man clung dearly to life, trying his best not to fall off. Ha-on-bith, once horrified and baffled to see the train derail so suddenly, tried to reach out to the leader, asking him if there was any technical issue, only to be left quite shocked by him claiming that the first training had begun. Baek Mu-young wanted the young man to walk to him and figure out the truth of his words on his own, while hanging above the void and clinging to his life. Our hero demanded an explanation, as he was unable to believe that this was part of the training, when suddenly, the train began to move once again. The young man screamed in horror as he approached the bottom even more. The anointed trainer asked him if he wanted him to restart the train. Ha-on-bith claimed that he was unable to lift himself up, which is why he begged for an easier training, claiming that he would do his best after learning the fundamentals. Baek Mu-young began stating that this training must be surprising for the young man, and revealed to him how it was supposed to reinforce his physique. He stated that for the young boy to complete the test, he would need some help regarding his balance before throwing the purple ball of energy towards the protagonist. Striking him in his core, the holder of the gun was invaded with an odd, painful sensation. Something powerful began to flow into his veins, and just like that, he burst forth with power. At the end of it all, the boy found himself surprised by the blue aura engulfing his body. Yet this energy felt alien to him, so his trainer explained to him how this was the latent energy inside him, and how everything possessed this concealed energy that doesn't usually interfere with the outside world, but awakening it in any special way would allow the hero to make it flow out. The young man was curious about what would happen next, so the leader revealed to him how he would soon feel worn out due to his inability to control his energy, but he reassured him by claiming that it would take a long time. Baek Moo-young explained to the holder of the dead star how he was now in a power-up state that would allow him to double or triple his strength, enabling him to climb up. Our hero had a hard time processing what he was hearing. His trainer explained to him that he would understand it once he tried it. Thus, he tasked him to reach the handle that is after the next one, which would finally allow him to understand the explanation. This baffled our hero. Upon taking a look at the objective and seeing how far it seemed, the young man refused to fulfill the task, claiming that he wasn't able to. He stated that it was already a struggle for him to keep himself hanging for this long. Yet the leader affirmed to him that this was trivial and stated that he should feel more at ease while hanging now that he was before the awakening of the inner energy. Our hero was shocked by those words yet found reason in them, as despite the struggles he faced at first, it was now very easy for him to keep himself hanging after the flowout. And so, as he began to wonder about his newfound strength, the leader urged him to hurry up. With that being said, the young man decided to use the handle near his foot in order to give himself a footing. And so, after taking a deep breath, he launched himself upwards, trying his best to reach the objective, until finally, he managed to grab onto something. But to his shock, this wasn't the assigned handle. In fact, the young man had reached a much higher objective. And so, as the boy began to scream, overjoyed by his achievement, the leader cracked a soft smile as his point had been proven. Meanwhile, on another train, someone was feeling worried. The one with the stone arms feared that the heart-rending test would discourage the motivated and young hero. But as Blue claimed that he had full faith in their leader, Taeduk was greatly annoyed, as this one was just opposing him for the pleasure of it. And so they began to bicker once again, leaving the invisible woman annoyed. Jin So-yul claimed that it was for Ha-on-bith's own good to end his advanced training, as he only had half a month in front of him. Even so, her senior thought that it was still too cruel for a teenager who had just undergone traumatizing events. The girl claimed that this only reinforced her argument, as surviving this immense pain would allow him to wield the gun, which would save them a lot of future training. Unlike physical power, mental strength, which was crucial to the control of the dead star, needed time to develop, and that in case the hero was mistrained, he would be consumed by the parasite, making him butcher countless innocents. Meanwhile, the young hero was amazed by the inner energy inside him that was constantly rejuvenating his strength. With that, the young man had faith in his own body and was certain of his ability to pass this test, when suddenly, blood began to come out of the protagonist's arm. The startled young man fell down the train in pain, landing in a safe spot that prevented him from falling to the bottom. Ha-on-bith began to tremble due to the intensity of the pain. Seeing how his arm was bleeding and hurting, he reported his injury to the trainer, claiming that he couldn't move due to the pain. This is why he asked for a small break in order to give energy to his arm to heal it, only for the leader to refuse and urge him to keep going. He informed the hero that he hadn't been magically upgraded and had just gained a huge amount of stamina, and that such injuries were meant to happen to his untrained body. The man even claimed that the hero had emitted enough energy to withstand the pain and quickly climb up, and that such events were bound to happen eventually. But as the boy stated that his arm had been sprained before begging for help, his trainer shouted at him to stop making excuses. This sudden change of behavior greatly surprised our hero. Baek Moo-young explained that this was no normal test but a trial for survival, meaning that he would have to withstand even harder training in order to remain alive. The leader explained how he was training him based on the demand of his mother and that he wouldn't stop him from giving up. Yet seeing how he was still unable to control the power of his parasites, he would annihilate the gun and the host in order to prevent any upcoming tragedy if he ever chose to surrender. As the train kept on dangling above the void, the boy begged for mercy, claiming that he would do his best. And so here again was this fighting, and he looked upwards. With that, our hero braced himself. But I found that doing so, something began to rip inside his leg, making him roll on his back in agony while screaming about the pain inside his leg. Baek Moo-young asked him to spare himself and surrender, as he wouldn't be able to survive if he didn't pass this test. The young man tried to argue that he was in too much pain, when suddenly something intriguing happened. As the train began to fall once again, leaving our hero horrified, the leader affirmed to him that all of this would be used as if he wouldn't be able to grow and have a month, and that determination was the only thing the boy had left. And so, despite his tears and the pain out here, it is right to ignore it and reach the summit, only to be struck by agony once again, leaving him in great suffering. The boy was very much upset as the hero asked for a timeout, claiming that he was unable to climb back up. With that, the man showcased a disappointed expression, before claiming that he had misjudged the situation, as he assumed that the trauma the young man had gone through would have made him stronger. Yet, to his shock, it turned him into a total whiner. Our hero was then left shocked as it was claimed that his mother would be ashamed of him. Upon hearing this, frustration began to build up. The leader was shocked, seeing how he was suddenly being forbidden from using those words. Ha-on-bith affirmed that the man shouldn't talk about what he didn't know, stating that he had no idea of the suffering he endured due to his condition, which made him a mockery among his peers. The protagonist affirmed that the leader had no right to talk about his mother's opinion so lightly. With that, the boss accused him of faking his injuries, and that despite the lifelong trauma he had undergone, he had weaponized the pain. According to the boss, one doesn't easily get used to surrendering, claiming that the young man never tried to make any effort due to his injury, seeing how acting as a strong person was pathetic in the eyes of others. Baek Moo-young affirmed that the young man was using this tactic in order to force others to do his bidding. Our hero tried to defend himself, only to be suddenly grabbed by the collar and screamed that he should stop thinking about the past and only focus on the upcoming future, where he had to do his best in order to survive. Upon being asked if he was going to keep asking others for help, the boy denied, claiming that he had never done such a thing, asserting that he always tried his best. Only then did he remember one of his friends who always helped him due to his condition, but this also reminded him of how he was once harassed by bullies and how he stood by, hiding and watching in silence. Ha-on-bith was certain that he had never asked for help, and that he did everything out of his own free will. After a short moment, the leader raised himself and punched the wall of the train. Our hero was left shocked as the entire structure began to tremble. With that being said, the wheels began to roll once again, as the train kept on slipping even further into the abyss. With that being said, the leader informed the trainee of how the train would fall in 2 minutes, and how he was free to make his own choice. And just as he was about to make his leave, Baek Moo-young asked Ha-on-bith to stop making excuses for his sinful past, and despite how challenging it is to admit his wrongs, he should always face the ugly truth and embrace reality, as one would live his entire life on the path he decides. Thus, he asked the young one to show some grit and confront his weak past self, as it was the only way for him to improve. As once one stops making excuses and tries to patch up his flaws, he'll become someone better who has greatly improved over time. Finally, the leader asked him to quickly make his decision. With that, the young man fell to his knees as the structure moved once again. The train was slowly slipping into the abyss. After arriving at the top of the train, the leader of the Black Shadows pulled out his phone and made a quick call regarding the squad on hold. After putting the phone down, the man urged the boy to quickly climb up, seeing how they were against the clock. The train kept on slipping. Upon seeing this, the disappointed trainer wanted to announce the failure of his student on the phone. Only then did he quickly notice that a hand was trying to make its way to the surface by grabbing the metal bar. Despite the excruciating pain flowing inside his body, he was doing his best to climb up. The one in pain admitted that the trainer was right about him, and that he had always used his frail condition as an excuse to never do his best in order to receive support. Ha-on-bith had a bad habit of bringing out his sickness in order to receive help whenever he needed to flee a certain situation, as it was easier than fighting back. But now our hero was sick of his way of living. As the train finally fell down, the young man's determination had been fixed. He was invaded by a deep desire to change his miserable life. In the end, the young man was unable to get out of there in time. Yet the leader couldn't help but be pleased by his determination. Due to the constant effort, our hero passed out. I began to fall to the bottom along with the train. The man who saw this cracked a soft smile, as he had been satisfied. With that being said, Baek Moo-young would now keep serving the protagonist, as his real training would commence shortly. Meanwhile, somewhere else where a cocoon was present, something began to move inside it, on to finally bursting out of the silk, and so the one inside it fell to the ground, while coughing all the strange liquid that was present inside. There were many other cocoons in this place. Our protagonist was trying to recatch his breath, while wondering about the weird fluid on him. But as he began to wonder about his whereabouts, seeing how he only remembers the train incident, he started studying the liquid dripping on the top of his head. The confused Ha-on-bith turned around, only to find a giant spider right above his head. Upon seeing this, he couldn't believe it, and was left screaming, horrified. He had a hard time processing the reason behind the presence of the enormous arachnid. In a move of panic, the young man began to scan the room, searching for an exit in order to flee the scene. Only then did he notice another person standing on the silk above, asking him why he wasn't in his cocoon anymore. He found it quite strange, seeing how the spider silk is usually a steady material. As she began to search for the reach, our amazed hero asked the girl to identify herself, making her realize that she hadn't even given her name. She introduced herself as Baek Solmi, the one responsible for the team's recovery, and the one who healed the protagonist after his encounter with the Saviors of Light. Hearing this greatly surprised our hero, Ha-on-bith then urged Baek Solmi to get the creature away from him, thinking that he was going to be eaten, only for her to reassure him that the spider was harmless. The spider was presented as Ara, who had experienced a sudden growth spurt, and whose webs were perfect for recovery, which is why she assured the protagonist, claiming this place to be safe and perfect for healing. Baek Solmi then informed the protagonist that he shouldn't go outside, as they would be spending some days here, before pointing out how cute Ara was. This left him quite disgusted as he began to think about her words. At that moment, the young man realized something odd, and demanded an explanation for the reason they would be staying here for a short term. This made Baek Solmi realize that no one had informed the protagonist about the plan, and so, as she explained it to him, he was left quite baffled. Shortly after, stones were being dragged. Someone urged Ha-on-bith to hurry up, claiming him to be too slow. This new trainer was very much displeased with the pace the young man, dragging a huge block of stone, was advancing at, until finally he fell to the ground. Our hero, covered in sweat, affirmed that he had reached his limits, and that he would be unable to pass this trial. Yet Taeduk affirmed to him that the fact that he could still talk meant that he could do more of this non-lethal training, before demanding him to get back on his feet and keep pushing himself until he finally collapses for the sake of gaining strength. And with that, the trainer informed the trainee that in order to rest, he would have to advance with all of his might before kicking him away. Just like that, the hellish training of the protagonist kept going on. Sometime later, he was awakened by drops of water. Ha-on-bith quickly got up as someone explained to him how regular humans were unable to use their inner energy due to their clogged letter channel, meaning that the inner energy circuit would certainly get blocked if he stops the Lete from flowing inside. Blue explained that a regular person could only access their inner energy by destroying the clog blocking their system. The swordsman then confused the training by asking him if he could feel his inner energy, and before our hero could even process what was happening, Blue immediately made his move and firmly punched him in the forehead, knocking him away a few feet. Blue then proceeded to ask the one he punched if he managed to feel the inner energy that he showcased. The crybaby, who asked for the reason he was being hit, got bombarded with a beverage aimed at his stomach by the swordsman, who then braced himself before dealing the ultimate punch that sent our hero flying into the trees with such speed that he easily broke through them before crashing into the big one deeper into the woods. Blue was trying to make some spots susceptible to inner energy even more sensitive to Lete. The teenager claimed that he couldn't take it any longer, and despite understanding the motives of the man, demanded another way of training. Blue stated that he understood the pain of the young man very well, claiming that it was a struggle that they all had to face and that he could take his time. Seeing how they just needed to attack the same spot again and again in order to make the inner energy burst out, the bloodthirsty swordsman was certain of his method. Sometime later, in another location, a lady was looking at the fancy view. She then pulled out her phone from her expensive bag and asked the other side of the line if there was anyone behind them contacting her. She thought that the caller was worried about her terminating Midori Sour, but upon hearing them decline, she urged the other side of the call to get to the chase. The lady claimed that she had been upset by Kwak Han-jun and that she didn't have the energy to chat. And so, while enjoying her wine, it was revealed to her how they had failed their mission despite the first one they had made. And upon being informed about their next step, she was left pretty astonished, as it included a rather pricey item. With that, the angry lady stated that her servants were useless and lacked skills. She was very much determined to judge the caller for their failure. And so, as she placed down her phone, the woman called out her servant, demanding him to locate a specific individual overseas. She claimed that it was an easy job that didn't require the goon much effort, before firmly advising him to erase all of his tracks. With that being said, the blob known as SSI went to execute the orders of his mistress. Sometime later, someone was trying to awaken our hero. Jin So-yul urged him to stop lying in bed and come with her. She reminded the boy how his priority should now be to get physically stronger and have a better mastery over the inner energy, claiming that this would be the reason behind them taking close combat lessons instead of the regular training, as combat knowledge would surely be useful later on. With that being said, she tossed him an item. That turned out to be a real firearm equipped with rubber bullets, seeing how he needed to familiarize himself with the dead star, meaning that he needed to know how to use a gun. Ha-on-bith doubted the fact that he needed to learn about martial arts, as learning to control inner energy and practicing marksmanship should be the most adequate thing to do. Only then did a fast projectile take a small chunk out of his face. As our hero bled and felt pain, the girl expressed how annoyed she was, as the boy thought that her lessons were useless. Yet she couldn't help but resonate with his logic, seeing how he was in possession of a great weapon. And as she tried to clear the misunderstanding, she stated that despite his enormous advantages against normal humans, when facing someone who uses Lete, he would be immediately obliterated, especially if his opponent has a good defensive game. Jin So-yul then bombarded the young man with a barrage of rubber bullets as she explained how powerless he was, and stated that even the slightest opening could give him the edge in a fight as she blasted him away. And so, after presenting her argument, she asked the young man if her training was really useless. The trainer then asked him how he expected the outcome of any gunfight as she pointed hers at him. Our hero tried to defend himself, only to be shot by a close-range rubber bullet. Shortly after, the protagonist found himself struggling in the healing domain. The girl asked him to stay conscious, as she called out her assistant, Spider. The beaten boy who wishes to be taught in normal ways was then covered in spider silk. The torch was burning bright. Inner energy would circulate in the host of the parasite's body once the circuit gets unblocked. If one uses a small amount of letter, the particles inside react oddly with the surroundings. This phenomenon is known as energy activation or letterization, according to the library keeper known as Kim Ju-young. Ha-on-bith claimed that he fathomed the words of the man, but as he asked him to explain once again, the man resolved to his power library of knowledge and activated a bookmark allowing him to draw out a certain tome regarding inner energy basics, which left the young man quite shocked. Shortly after, an imprint had been deployed. With that, the librarian closed the book, as its pages merged themselves into the body of the confused hero. Ha-on-bith was once shocked to see himself suddenly becoming quite knowledgeable about the subject. Kim Ju-young explained how he was an advanced energy user who could shape his own powers to transfer knowledge into someone's mind. Yet one had to continuously review this information, or risk forgetting everything. Seeing how the young man seemed to have understood everything on paper, the guardian of the library decided to begin the practical part. Meanwhile, someone knocked at the door. The team leader asked the man for the reason behind him staying up this late. This one claimed that he couldn't sleep in peace, seeing how he didn't have the ability to dream. Cheo Ji-han, the Daon professor, claimed that despite taking sleeping pills on the doctor's order, the arrival of the team leader would surely keep him awake. At first, Beck claimed that this was about a normal visit, only for the scholar to know that it wasn't the case and ask him to cut straight to the chase. Asking the team leader if he wanted to accomplish the task he had at hand, he had already completed all of his, only for the man to claim that this was a trivial matter and that they should grab coffee together. Cheo Ji-han immediately realized that his friend had discovered something and asked him to share his discovery. And so he revealed to him how he found a good witness for the case of Heo-hoon. This made the old man laugh, as these words had resulted in failure in the past. Yet the team leader affirmed that he was natural to fail after countless wins. The professor commented on the spectacular explosion, claiming that if the tragedy occurred once again, our hero would certainly meet his end, only for the employer to reassure him and firmly claim that his new employee wasn't the average teenager. The librarian explained to the protagonist how letterization consists of giving energy physical form inside or outside of the body, and that water was easy to control with it, stating to the struggling boy that using the inner energy on the element would turn it into droplets. But in the end, the teenager was unable to accomplish the task, as he didn't know the right procedure, and so he asked for extra time in order to control water. Yet the guardian of the library began to walk away as he decided to resume this lesson tomorrow. After catching his breath, Ha-on-bith asked the man if he was using the right method. The librarian asked him to elaborate, so the boy explained how, upon reflecting on his training, he found it to be a failing beat-up, and that despite doing his best, he would certainly fail to master his weapon, the time limit. Thus, he apologized for wasting their effort due to his uselessness. Our hero was then surprised as the librarian claimed that he wasn't that powerless. Kim explained how the young man who kept failing had the shortest recovery time ever seen, and that he was slowly improving despite all of them doubting him at first. Even after that, the boy still had his doubts, seeing how he was still unable to control inner energy. This made the librarian compare letter training to a dark labyrinth, as just like the rest of the team, the boy was bound to explore this neural maze alone and stumble upon dead ends before meeting success. The words of the man were deeply engraved into the protagonist as he affirmed that failing trials were trivial if one tried again in order to learn, which is why he asked him to not push himself over the edge in order to grow, as in the end, the state of powerlessness that shackled him would certainly break and let him run free. Sometime later, in another location, our hero found himself jogging. He then began to think about evolution, as he dashed forward, that it was something challenging to achieve as he got easily defeated by Blue. As despite the hellish training he had been put through, it felt difficult to improve. Seeing how the second Beyond Man tried to reach a new level, he would be inflicted with great failure. That would return him to the starting point. Even so, such matters became trivial to the protagonist. Ha-on-bith was determined to get stronger. He knew very well that the lack of certainty would make him meet his end without reaching a new level, which is why the young man was more determined than ever to not show any hesitation in order to finally reach a new level and become stronger. Bith knew very well that it didn't matter that he was bound to fail many times, as he still had some strength sealed inside him. Our hero was determined to succeed, in order to finally evolve. And so, filled with a burning passion, the one who surpassed himself let out a fierce roar upon reaching the peak. During marksmanship, none of the cans had been hit. When the time came for close combat practice, the teenager managed to hold his ground. The training became more and more hellish, yet the protagonist kept on progressing and adapting to the incoming difficulties, only for his trainers to come up with even more crazed concepts for him to improve. After some time, the hands of the protagonist became more steady, allowing him to finally hit his target successfully. And so, as the can fell to the ground, the young man turned to his instructor, who praised him with a gesture, leaving him quite overjoyed. Sometime later, inside the cave, the librarian instructed the boy to empty himself of thoughts and focus on what's around him in order to better control the energy. He then asked him to try to control it and perceive it spinning as it slowly surrounds his body. But upon seeing how the protagonist followed his instructions perfectly, the guardian of the library cracked a smile and congratulated him on passing his training. Sometime later, the swordsman had the young man at his knees and claimed that he was just wasting his time if he didn't change his tactics, and so he reminded him of how he should try to perceive the letter with his entire body, not just his vision. The man affirmed to the boy, as he struck him with the sword once again, that he would never stop the circulation of his energy at this rate. With that being said, the holder of the gun began to take off blood. The exhausted young man then fell to his knees, as he desperately tried to catch his breath. Upon seeing this, the instructor decided to end today's lesson, demanding that his pupil go heal himself. But as he walked away, his attention was suddenly caught by our hero, who stood up on his feet and asked for one more trial. The young man, who took a defensive position, claimed that he shall not fail like the other times. Upon seeing this, Blue accepted to try one last time, and so he braced himself and asked the young man to force himself and to bury his attack. Our hero, who was certain of his ability to succeed, decided to not rely on his eyes, which allowed him to perceive the flow of energy heading his way. The incoming letter felt like a small wind. Our hero quickly realized that this energy belonged to the swordsman currently attacking him, and so, after quickly reading the flow, he managed to predict when he was going to be hit, and desperately tried to block it, only to be blasted into the air with his blood coming out. Even so, the one who sent our hero flying cracked a smile and praised him for passing his training. With that being said, the unconscious Bith later fell from a spider. Beck Solmi, who was amazed to see him back on his feet so fast, suggested that he rest more, only for him to affirm that there was no need, and that he was now healthy enough to go for a quick run, as he assured the girl, who anxiously turned around, pointing out how much his condition had improved. But as the shredded young man explained that he didn't feel himself getting better, he was suddenly smacked with a backpack. The one who threw it at him called him out for trying to hit on his senior after getting better, only for the boy and the girl to affirm that it wasn't the case. As they applied to explain the situation to the girl, who didn't care, she asked them to gather his things and wait in front of the headquarters, which intrigued our hero, seeing how his training was still incomplete. To his shock, it was revealed that they were heading to the Himalayas. Jin Soyul claimed that the boy spent enough time inside the hideout, and that he needed to get some fresh air. Sometime later, at the foot of the Himalaya mountains, the place was quite lively. Upon setting foot there, the protagonist has no idea about his location. So the senior explained to him how this was Nepal, which was a village at the foot of the mountains. The boy felt amazed as he wasn't surrounded by Koreans as usual. Even so, he felt intrigued seeing how they should be practicing the regular training right now. Jin Soyul informed him that he had already completed those trainings, and that he only needed to complete the last one. This confused our hero. So the guardian of the library explained how they were going to install a shield around his heart to purify the corrupt energy of the dead star, and in order to forbid it from consuming the young man, who would be able to perfectly control it afterwards. The man then claimed that based on the inner energy of the boy, they were racing against the clock, and that there was a master who would install the shield here in the Himalayas. And so shortly after, our heroes embarked on the truck. The shield will not precisely shackle the parasite, but only delay its effects to a distant future. Even afterwards, Bith would still be able to use his inner energy, potentially allowing him to surpass the dead star while sealed. For this reason, the leader of the Dark Shadows went to locate the master, and urged his men to meet him inside a specific villa in order to get some updates. After knocking at the door for some time, the protagonist opened the door and informed the others that the villa was empty, making them think that they had just arrived early and that they should just wait underneath. As the librarian pointed out how cold it was inside the villa, his colleague decided to ignite the chimney. He then decided to check on the condition of the protagonist regarding his energy control. Ha-on-bith claimed that he did need to get even better, as stabilizing energy was a hard task since the energy would just dissipate if he got distracted. The man who asked him to get closer claimed that it would become an unconscious reflex. He decided to project an inner energy strengthening spell into the brain of the child in case of emergency, as one shouldn't use energy before the procedure. Only for the hero to cheerfully claim that he had dependable allies, so he shouldn't resort to it. Jin So-yul brought up the scenario where everything goes south, affirming that no one was safe outside of the HQ, and that the boy should always be wary in order not to be caught by surprise. When suddenly a sound was heard outside, a rabbit hole was present on the ground, and from it came out someone who was happy to arrive in time. This was none other than the leader who arrived with Ju Hee-sung, the meteor user, and Yong Ju-hun, who can create rabbit holes. As soon as the boss made the introductions, the two boys rushed to hug the newcomer out of the blue. The boss noticed how much the new recruit had grown. Ha-on-bith affirmed that he had spared no effort, leaving the man quite pleased. Jin So-yul then asked him if he had found the master in question, and he asked his men to come inside so he could give them a brief explanation. According to the leader, the master in question was known as Ha-hoon, who was a very mysterious and secretive person taught by the best, known for having shielding powers. The Black Shadow clan tried to reach out to the master many times, yet stopped pursuing him as they couldn't find his location. Even so, at this crucial moment, Ha-hoon was spotted once again within the mountains. The sources of the plan led them to believe that the master only showed himself twice at the village before disappearing into the night. Following the trail of the man led the leader and his allies to the heart of the mountains, and despite being certain that they would find him at the end of the footsteps, Ha-hoon's trace suddenly vanished at some point. And despite their best efforts in searching the area, the three men decided to receive a sign of life that had exported. Jin So-yul was baffled to see that there existed a man who could escape First Superior without leaving a trace. Yet the guardian of the library pointed out that the master coming back to get food needed him to believe that he was, in fact, hiding, not running. Yong Ju-hun found reason in the words of the man, claiming that something felt fishy about the rocks at the deserted location where they couldn't find a trace. With that, the leader decided to give the tracking task to the most competent one, which was Jin So-yul. This annoyed the girl, seeing how she wanted to relax and execute easy tasks. Shortly after, the search began. The rabbit hole summoner pointed the invisible woman to the location in question. Shortly after, her magic circle began to react to something. Seeing how the point she was standing at was suspicious, she asked the others to come closer. After examining the rock, Jin So-yul claimed that they were in the right location. She asked the librarian to investigate the weird rocking energy, unlike the others. After taking a quick look, Kim Ju-young stated that it was a barrier similar to the one he saw in books, and that the target must have used it to hide himself. When asked if he could reach it, the librarian claimed that it was difficult, but they should be able to enter by making a small hole in it that someone should maintain. And so Chung Ju-hun was tasked with keeping the barrier open, leaving him graciously annoyed as he tried to refuse the task, only for the man to ignore him and try to open it. Shortly after, some runes appeared on the rock. The stone then began to fissure before finally exploding into pieces. Shortly after, everything went quiet. Our hero quickly noticed that it was snowing. All were confused about whether they had entered or not. It was early for the girl to claim that this location felt different, as one of her colleagues stated that this wide place was more similar to the rest of the mountain. Only then did he notice something odd in front of him. Our heroes found themselves in front of a giant cave. Upon seeing this, the leader corrected his smile, seeing how he had expected to see a proper house. With that, he began to wonder about what the three key one prepared for them inside. As such, a place was better off referred to as a dungeon. This made the girl wonder about the humanity of the man, seeing how he had created something so immense. The leader pointed out how this place was too spacious for a single person, as the hero realized the reason behind the man getting so much food. With that, the boss asked his men to get into formation as they were entering an unwelcoming domain. He asked them to be very quiet as he divided their positions. The guardian of the library then asked the hero to go back to base camp if he got lost, as it was much safer than trying to regroup with the team. And just as Ha-on-bith affirmed that he understood the plan, something began to move from beneath the snow. Just like that, a giant arm of stone suddenly rose from the ground. A colossal creature then proceeded to make its entrance. All were left startled as they were now in front of a giant golem. This particularly confused Jin So-yul, but upon taking a good look at the monster, she felt alerted and urged everyone to retreat just before it could strike. The protagonist evaded a crushing death by an inch. Its left hand was blown away as the monster had a ridiculous speed despite its gigantic size. Shortly after, our hero was attacked once again by a devastating punch. Yet the golem was not that surprised, as the librarian managed to grab the panicked boy at the last second. After placing his hand on the ground, the meteor user began to activate his power. After everything had been completed, he unleashed his meteor with all of his might, piercing the skull of the golem from end to end. And with a quick snap of his fingers, the inner energy user managed to detonate his projectile, while proudly claiming that size was nothing in front of skill. Shortly after, the young man realized that he had talked too fast. With that being said, our heroes kept on evading devastating blows after the monster surprisingly began to move without a head before quickly growing it back. The girl decided to resort to her power, allowing her to precisely locate the core of the golem. Yet just as she alerted the chief of its precise location, the monster landed a devastating blow that Jin So-yul barely managed to escape. Yet at that moment, she found herself under attack once again, and just as she was about to give up, a black flash of lightning occurred. Just like that, the core of the gigantic monster had been disintegrated. The golem had been shattered to pieces. Just like that, the leader easily managed to take down the colossal guardian. The man thanked and checked up on his subordinate and helped her to get up. The annoyed girl was confused about the sudden appearance of the giant monster, as no living soul seemed to be nearby. Her colleague explained to her how this must be an automatic trap meant to take care of intruders. When asked if it was normal for the destroyed monster to make some noises, the confused librarian approached the creature in order to examine this phenomenon. Suddenly, some runes appeared on it. Upon seeing this, he tried to alert his friend about the danger, only for the rock to suddenly crack before exploding spectacularly. Everything happened at incredible speed. Our hero, who didn't have time to react, suddenly disappeared. With that being said, only the wind was left with the rocks and the snow. Everything seemed quiet, as after this massive wave of energy, our heroes had disappeared. Meanwhile, in another location, multiple flashes of light occurred. That's where the "Meet Your User" appeared. We began to scream inside the cave, waiting for a response. While walking, he suddenly stumbled upon something. Upon seeing that it was a human skull, the horrified young man began to scream out of terror. He was left even more startled as his coworker suddenly appeared from behind him and called him out for screaming so loud. None of the black shadows had been harmed. The one with red hair was confused as to why they had been teleported to this location. So the guardian of the library explained to him how it was a trap that activates upon destroying the golem, making it teleport every nearby living creature to this cave. Kim Ju-young explained that this place, made to trap anyone strong enough to destroy the guardian, would forbid anyone inside from using their powers. And while the girl was left quite annoyed, the boy was left horrified as the bones were not simple decorations. The leader asked his team to stay positive, claiming that they would have gotten lost anyway if they had used the main entrance of the cave. What seemed to be a spout of nonsense greatly angered Jin So-yul, seeing how the numerous bones were obviously a bad sign. Yet the man reassured her that they surely wouldn't die of famine, pointing to the signs that showed that this place had been recently visited. According to the leader, every time someone is teleported inside the cave, a certain someone would certainly come check them out. He stated that if the culprit was none other than Hanun, they would have saved a lot of time searching for him. At that moment, the leader realized that they were missing the most vital part of their mission, leaving the girl quite confused. Meanwhile, the teleportation, which had been corrupted by the dark energy of the gun, made our hero fall elsewhere. Yet he quickly managed to get back on his feet. Shortly after, the young man was met with nothing but silence and began to call for his friends, but to his shock, there was no trace of the other black shadows. Only then did he notice a sudden movement. Ha-on-bith, who turned around thinking that the chief was behind him, found himself in front of a horrifying and powerful-looking hound. Our hero, who had a hard time processing things, greeted the bloodthirsty-looking beast. The young man tried to leave that scene, but upon seeing the monster drooling over him, he realized that he was now prey in front of a predator. The hound was quick to move, but the boy, who managed to predict the attack, dodged it at the last minute. The wolf backed up a few steps before charging at our hero once again and missed him by an inch. With that being said, the annoyed Ha-on-bith began to fight back by kicking the monster in its skull. Yet the beast was quick to catch itself before launching the attack once again. The alerted boy dodged the beast's terrifying power at the last minute. The attack that he just evaded was strong enough to shatter an immense pillar. The protagonist was blown away by this power, making him realize that he wasn't facing a normal beast. But just as he began to strategize in order to achieve success, something appeared from the darkness behind him and tried to catch him in a sneak attack. Just like that, our hero began to bleed. Ha-on-bith immediately tried to gain some distance. He had the annoying surprise of discovering that there was more than one wolf inside this cave, and so he began to wonder about his next action, as any wrong move would result in his death. At that moment, the young man remembered the words of his senior, claiming that he was responsible for watching his own back and that he didn't have any right to complain if he ever got killed. The protagonist was left greatly annoyed, seeing how he was acting like his weak past self. He was angry at himself for almost giving up before trying in front of these monsters that were obviously weaker than his trainers, and so he decided to resort to the emergency technique given to him by the librarian. But as he focused to activate it, one of the monsters tried to attack him from behind, and just like that, blood had been spilled. The hound landed back on the ground. Only then did it realize what had truly happened, as the boy managed to get out of the attack safe and sound, using his new technique. Ha-on-Bith was proud of himself for having used letter strengthening, which was a basic move that allowed him to reinforce the strength of an object and enable it to exert more force the more he concentrated energy inside it. Seeing how the technique had been deployed successfully, our hero, who was being attacked by a wolf, realized that he could easily deal with the beasts as he proceeded to punch one of them, with an immense amount of power, allowing him to knock it down in a single blow. Ha-on-Bith did his best to try and catch his breath. He then began to panic as his letter was dissipating into his surroundings, making him urge himself to contain it. One of the beasts used this short distraction to tackle the protagonist and knock him to the ground. The monster wasn't done just yet, as it launched a powerful attack once again, only to be quickly blocked by the young man who held its jaws closed at the last minute. The struggling hero praised the monster for its strength and claimed that if it kept acting so violently, he would have no choice but to humble it as he proceeded to launch it into the air. The animal was left terrified of the savage. The letter user then grabbed it by the head and apologized to it, before mercilessly beginning to beat it. The young man showed extreme ferocity as he was more determined than ever to survive. After making sure that the monster could no longer move, the protagonist finally sat down. He was particularly happy, seeing how he had managed to take down such an enormous hound. With that, he decided to follow the instructions given to him and retreat to the rabbit hole user. Suddenly, a chill ran down his spine, as something was drawing close from behind. The three new opponents who appeared immediately surrounded the teenager. This made him laugh in disbelief, seeing how he wasn't out of danger yet as many known guys began to come out of the shadows. And yet he wasn't afraid. In fact, the young man found himself quite happy at the opportunity of taking down more wolves. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the cave, the allies of the young man were searching for him, only to realize that he wasn't with them in the cell. The guardian of the library realized that the boy must have ended up elsewhere due to his parasite tangling with the teleportation process, and so the girl felt alerted and urged her leader to make a move. Yet the man affirmed to her that Ha-Noon wouldn't agree to help them, seeing how they would be intruders who would have destroyed the inside of his cave. Jin So-yul screamed that the safety of the protagonist was more important than property damage, only for the leader to remind her that they couldn't afford to lose the shield, claiming that despite how difficult the task was, they needed to complete it and gather that acquired in or risk messing the entire operation up. According to the boss, their new recruit should be able to defend himself, and then they should also try to fulfill their part of the job. Suddenly, someone began to approach the cave. This certain someone was particularly angry and in a hurry. The man was frustrated by the fact that his location had been discovered, kicked the bars in anger while urging his prisoners to fall back as it was going to fall on them. Only then did he notice something odd. The man pointing the rifle at our heroes was none other than the warden. Noon noticed that one of the intruders was missing. With that, he angrily screamed at them, demanding answers and threatening to leave them trapped alone in this cell. The leader immediately recognized the warden as the one they had been searching for. Seeing how the one on his guard seemed to be freezing, he offered him his coat in order to keep him warm. When suddenly holes appeared in the cloth, the man who shot the coat urged his prisoners to reveal the location of their ally. While there, he began to grieve his expensive coat. The man then explained to the master how they got separated from the protagonist during the teleportation. Upon hearing this, Ha-Noon angrily claimed that the man was lying, as he had counted 5 people appearing in the cell, which left the strong one quite intrigued. Jin So-yul explained to the gunholder that they came here in order to ask for his help, thus they had no reason to hide the truth and even proposed using a lie detector. The librarian revealed to Ha-Noon how their friend was the host of the Dead Star and that they failed to contain it, which is why his services were needed. Yet when asked for help, the man burst out laughing, claiming that a certain group of people were out of their minds and too stubborn. The meteor user tried to affirm that they weren't from the people the man speaks of, yet wasn't believed. Ha-Noon affirmed to his prisoners that letting one of them escape would be pointless as this dangerous cave was under his control. Firm that the wolves known as Mu-Chi were ferocious, and that a certain demise awaited their comrade who was trying his best to move across the monsters. Finally, one of these managed to drag the protagonist with him. Our hero, who was suddenly overwhelmed, firmly grabbed the fang of the monster before taking it out and stabbing it with it in order to survive. Ha-on-Bith repeated the violent actions many times as he deeply desired to escape this place alive. Now covered in blood, he tried his best to retake his breath. Upon seeing the brutal massacres, the beast slowly began to back down. This greatly pleased Ha-on-Bith, as he was in desperate need of a break. Ha-on-Bith began to wonder how deep he was in the cave. He then theorized that the deepest part of the caves was the coldest, meaning that he was getting closer. After a few steps, amazement appeared on his face as he found himself in front of a breathtaking view. Ha-on-Bith rushed to check it out. The boy began to wonder if the lake he was standing on had frozen recently, thinking that he was at the center of the cave. This left him greatly pleased, as picking the right way would allow him to find an escape. Thus, he decided to take the shortest path. Yet while running to what seemed to be freedom, the ice suddenly began to crack. Our hero felt alerted as something enormous emerged from the frozen lake. The curious one turned around only to find a tall pillar of ice standing behind him. The ice structure then began to move and suddenly opened its mouth. Just like that, the colossal monster of ice emerged with a fierce roar. Our hero was now left in a tough situation as he found himself about to face a giant. The one who faced the stone golem found himself annoyed by the fact that he had to face his frozen counterpart. The monster suddenly disappeared. Our hero managed to evade the sneak attack at the last second. Ha-on-Bith immediately realized that his opponent wasn't like the one he faced at the entrance of the cave. Seeing how he was getting easily overwhelmed, he decided to make his escape by going through a small cave that the giant monster couldn't possibly enter. Only then did the thing raise its arm and unleash a powerful attack of ice spikes towards its opponent. The boy, who couldn't outrun the ice, found himself trying to block it before falling to the ground. Ha-on-Bith began to tremble as he had somehow escaped an impaling death. This level of power quite amazed our hero. The ice golem then launched another attack, and shortly after, our hero found himself coughing blood and screaming in pain after getting smashed by the giant of ice. The captured one had no choice but to recognize the superior power of the monster. This one then picked him up with a cold hand that began to dissipate his consciousness. At that moment, our hero thought of peacefully closing his eyes upon seeing how he was going to meet his end in such a low place. Ha-on-Bith screamed at the dead star inside him for help because he was determined to survive in order to finally uncover the truth and get his revenge on the saviors of light. With that being said, the young man began to beg the parasite for help as he wanted to hold the weapon in his hand just like their first interaction. But at that moment, the monster unleashed his final attack. And so, after a small silence, the monster who thought himself to be the victor noticed something intriguing as a black flame was slowly burning through his arm of ice. Shortly after, the dark sphere had been formed. Just like that, the powerful monster had been destroyed by a powerful beam of darkness. With that, the ice golem was reduced to lifeless shards that began to rain on the ground. Meanwhile, the protagonist, who found himself with a giant piece of ice in his chest, managed to destroy it easily. The entity then began to complain about how hard a body was to control. Even so, it was pleased. The dead star that had now manifested itself was finally free to wreak havoc. With his opponent having finally been taken down, the vessel came back to the ground, took a deep breath, and began to sense all the dark energy coming from the heart. This greatly pleased the one in control. Yet while wondering about some matters, the ice began to move once again. It began to gather itself once again, in order to let the monster retake shape. For the one with the dark energy who noticed this remained unfazed, and fired a few bullets. That shattered the golem to pieces. He began to wonder if there was a way to neutralize the golem, which surely lacked trickery. Only then did he feel alerted, as he jumped off in order to evade the ice spikes coming out of the ground. This greatly amazed the host, and so he kept on evading the rising pillars and using them as his footing in order to jump higher. The iceberg kept on rising from the ground at a horrifying speed, allowing the monster to summon his ice hell. The protagonist found this to be quite interesting. At that moment, he noticed a tower rising from the ground. Just like that, the golem cost revived and let out a fierce roar. The one in control was alerted as it was about to pull a new move. Just like that, a snowstorm had been unleashed, blasting a wind so powerful that it began to smash its way through the thick ice spikes by using our hero as the tip of its spear. Even so, the main character didn't see much damage but was covered in a thick layer of ice. Seeing how the monster was trying to freeze his veins, the holder of the gun decided to fight back by melting the ice on him using black flame. The golem wasn't out of tricks, as he left our hero concerned by forming two giant ice balls in his hands. After reaching the demanded size, the spheres broke down into flying shards in order to unleash the attack known as ice spikes. The protagonist managed to survive the attack, but was left greatly annoyed as he began to wonder about a way to defeat the golem. With that, he began to recall the past actions of the chief. That allowed him to vanquish the stone golem. Having realized that he must have killed the giant by destroying its core, the holder of the gun braced himself, before punching the ice star with all of his might, destroying half of it in a single blow. Yet the parasite wasn't done just yet. as he kept bombarding it with powerful attacks, until nothing was left in his way. With that being said, this one began to wonder about a path that would let him escape the cave. Only then did he notice that the ice was moving once again. This left him particularly annoyed as, despite his efforts, the terrifying ice golem was still alive. The creature then started up a powerful breath, making our hero realize that he was now in a tough situation. The monster then unleashed his powerful beam, that the holder of the dead star managed to dodge at the last second. And so, while trying to evade the attacks, he began to wonder about the reason behind the monster surviving, only to be caught by a giant hand of ice and be quickly slammed into the ground. The protagonist was then left alerted as many giant hands were heading his way, and all attacked him at the same time. Yet from beneath the ice the black flame appeared once again, and incinerated everything nearby. After some thinking, the young man realized the solution to his problem, as the thing he labeled as a golem of ice was in fact the cave itself, and that its core must be concealed away, which is why it was able to come back so many times. The wielder of the dead star realized that he would have to locate the core present in the cave in order to finally terminate the golem, which he found to be an easy task. He immediately theorized that such a precious item would have been hidden in the least dangerous place in the entire cave. As he watched the powerful beams form themselves, the host formulated his plan, easily jumped out of harm's way before preparing a beam of his own, and fired it towards the safe location, which turned out to be the bottom of the frozen lake. Just like that, the thick layers of ice were shattered by the ray of dark energy. With that being said, the true core of the monster was finally visible. This greatly pleased our hero. Yet the monster wasn't about to give up just yet, as it desperately launched its ice spikes towards the one who uncovered its weakness. The host pointed out how frustrated the monster must be, and affirmed to him that he was already doomed, before unleashing the final attack. That incinerated the core. The final flash was so strong that the cave itself began to tremble. All noticed this disturbance. All, including the owner of the cave. At first, the coding master thought that this was a natural phenomenon, only to quickly realize that it was something much more horrifying at work. As everything kept on shaking, the man rushed to gather his stuff. He was annoyed, thinking that he was under attack, and as he grabbed a pair of keys involved to reach a certain location, he suddenly felt something lurking behind his back. Just like that, the master found himself facing the presence of a weird-looking blob. That left him quite confused and shocked. With that being said, he began to back down slowly, quietly reaching for his rifle, before shooting the thing down in a swift motion. But upon seeing how his bullets just went through the matter, the man was left horrified. Shortly after, he found himself getting tossed around. He desperately tried to reach his weapon, only for the thing to snap it in half. The blob suddenly grew many mouths and numerous teeth in order to end the man. But just as the master begged for help, thinking that he was on the brink of meeting his doom, a knife came out of nowhere, slashing the creature in half. That being said, its mask fell to the ground. The rescuer finally understood what the coding master meant back then, as it turned out that this creature was teleported into the cell with his team. The leader of the Dark Shadows also realized that their talk about their missing ally didn't do them any favors. The man was astonished to see the prisoner out of his cell, so he informed him of a weak spot within the prison that they exploited, as it was easier to use inner energy there. He pointed out that it was the same weak spot that allowed the shapeshifter to escape the cell. The leader, who recognized the skills of the thing, asked him about the method he had used to escape the prison without anyone noticing, and so he proposed a truce for the time being, as it was for the good of all. Yet the response of the blob came out as a powerful attack in the form of dark creatures. This left the leader annoyed. Even so, he expected this much. With that, he quickly began to slash his way through the creatures, taking down the extensions of the dark matter one by one. But as he kept on showing his knife skills, he noticed something intriguing. His opponent had created many mouths full of teeth that he launched at him quickly and simultaneously. With that being said, the man adjusted his grip on the knife, braced himself before unleashing a tempest of cuts that allowed him to remain unharmed. The thing then began to form hounds from its black matter, and all attacked the strong one from all directions. But the chief was quick on his feet and managed to kill them all, one by one. At that moment, the masked creature charged at the man by itself. The one who noticed this immediately countered, landing a clean cut on the black goo. The one with the mask was now startled as it felt its opponent suddenly appearing behind it, and just like that, the mask had been destroyed, making the blob fall to the ground. Only then did the leader notice another hound forming itself behind him. To him, the situation was particularly irritating. The creatures gained in power each time they came back, and the main body was able to regrow itself from those extensions. With that, the man finally understood why the terrorist group only sent this single individual here, as it was an elite shapeshifter. The chief realized that he wouldn't be able to kill the creature unless he had a plan. Well, that being said, the man evaded the attack while thinking of how his opponent would gain in power as combat progressed. This made him realize that he couldn't stop for a moment when facing such an enemy. Thus, he needed to eliminate all of its extensions, yet he couldn't do it one by one. He knew very well that his timing must be perfect. The man then snapped his fingers while thinking of how the creatures would become stronger each time they came back. And just like that, the bit of power that he left inside began to activate. Just like that, all of the monsters now had dark spears in them, as the culprit realized that weakening the monsters and taking them out all at once would be the best solution. It was the quickest and the safest. Seeing how the main body had no way of defending itself, he began to bombard it with attacks. After the merciless beating, a small core tried to escape, leaving the rest of its body behind, only for the chief to quickly catch up to it. With that, the monster decided to resort to some tricks, as it suddenly attacked the master by surprise. Yet right before it could finish him off, the black shadow intervened at the last minute and took out the creature. With that being said, the man turned around in order to look at his opponent, only to find some black matter it left behind. This left him quite annoyed as the sneaky one managed to escape. As the leader began to babble about how they should just keep their differences behind, he had now made up for his status as an intruder. He was suddenly grabbed by the collar by the man who accused him of orchestrating it all. Despite knowing about the enemy, he allowed it to get out of the cell in order to let it attack him. The leader tried to clarify, yet the man didn't want to hear any excuses, claiming that he was just like the saviors of light. But to his shock, the leader pointed out that he wouldn't have been credible inside the cell. The man would have certainly called him a liar, on top of making the thing wary of them. Thus, the only way to protect him was to let the monster out. With that being said, Hanun finally let go of the leader. But just as he tried to apologize and thank him for his help, he was suddenly tossed a backpack. The master, who didn't like intruders, decided to help the Black Shadow in order to repay them for saving his life. He urged the man to follow him as he could only help the boy for a short period of time. Shortly after, that same man was being scolded. He had no choice but to apologize once again to his team for leaving them behind. When asked about the enemy, Hanun explained how the attackers were once his employers. The librarian asked him what he did for them, to which he immediately responded by stating that he committed crimes for them. Unforgivable crimes, where the painful regret was useless. Only then did they need to ask this man to stop, stating that they should resume this conversation another time, as they were not in front of a horrifying giant dark flame. Near the fire stood the protagonist, who, as soon as he noticed his allies, approached them, while pointing out how their not arriving on time made them miss an epic fight. The leader affirmed that they tried to rejoin him as fast as possible, only to be met with some problems for pointing out how hard it must have been on the young man. He then informed him that they had found the coding master, and agreed to help them, to start right away. The protagonist refused to proceed. Hanun claimed that after experiencing the power of the gun, he didn't want to seal it away. The chief claimed that he had already gotten the approval, and that they couldn't evade the quick operation. Our hero had a hard time understanding his friends. As the host with black eyes decided to demonstrate his might to the Black Shadows, their leader was left alerted. He then urged his friends to gain their battle positions. As our corrupted hero aimed his weapon and began to demonstrate the might of his gun, the beam of flag flames caused great destruction. The meteor summoner managed to escape it at the last moment, only to find himself getting bombarded by a barrage of shots. And so he did his best to escape while the attacker pointed out how great the dead star was. Shortly after, the host noticed the leader approaching him from behind. And so he quickly blocked his attack and began to exchange blows with him as he expressed how eager he was to finally have it out with a strong opponent. Hanun aimed his weapon as the man pointed out how he didn't expect them to fight this early. Seeing this, the quick one immediately closed the distance while evading the attack before punching the young man in the face. This sent him flying into the walls of the cave, only for a dark beam to charge up once again and fire towards the one who immediately escaped it. The corrupted hero was greatly entertained. Only then did someone gain the high ground. The Red Hat was now armed with a giant glacier and urged his junior to come back to his senses, pointing out how he was getting consumed by the parasite before launching the glacier towards him. This left the young man quite annoyed, and so he decided to counterattack with his dark flames. His friend was quick and managed to shield himself by summoning a wall of ice. But to the inner energy user's surprise, his defenses weren't strong enough. Just like that, the corrupted hero closed the distance by cracking up the wall, leaving his ally with no way to defend himself. With that being said, the parasite decided to go for the kill. But just as it was about to pull the trigger, his position was suddenly exchanged with that of the leader, who resorted to shadow switch. Shortly after, the young man found himself getting swarmed by book pages. Shortly after, the corrupted one was sealed in a cocoon of paper. This was none other than the guardian of the library, who managed to see his ally out of control. within his best to hold down his man, who was angry at the fact that he was about to die. When asked about the strength of the seal, the tall one claims it was made for me, meaning that it only lasts half an hour. Jin So-yul urged the coding master to hurry up, leaving him quite irritated. And with that being said, Ha-noon deployed his precision crafting. As he proceeded with the operation, the man began to think of how unlucky the boy was, as he was among the few rumored to possess such abilities. Only to notice something intriguing. Upon seeing that the operator had encountered an issue, the girl asked him to share the problem with them. He explained how there was no way to create the shield as the required material, which was the natural energy of the boy, had been exhausted. Someone suggested donating some of their own, only for the master to firmly decline, claiming that just like blood, the transfused energy must be compatible. The librarian then proposed another substitute, suggesting to use the universal inner energy coming from the cold shards at the bottom. Noon was left baffled, as the black shadows managed to destroy the core of the cave that would work for the transfusion. Thus, he tasked them with bringing a lot of the fragments. When asked if the operation was done, the master revealed that there was only one issue left at hand. Seeing how they needed an item to separate the minds of the host and the parasite, as without it, the boy could suffer great brain damage. The leader asked for a way to prevent that. So Ha-noon explained how the young man's behavior led them to believe that he was currently fighting the gun in the deepest part of his mind, and that one of them needed to enter his subconscious and help him fight off the dead star in order to let him proceed with the operation. All were left baffled as the leader immediately volunteered, asking the tall one to help him enter. The librarian was left shocked, as he had no experience regarding mind transfusion, pointing out that it was too dangerous. The girl agreed, stating that either she or the other subordinates should take on this risky task, only for the strong one to claim that he had to be the one to do it, seeing how he needed to maintain the unbelievable promise that he made to our hero to have him survive, and that he needed to help him for the trust he had shown. And with that, he asked for help with the preparations once again, as he was determined to put his life on the line in order to save Ha-on-bith. Despite the situation not being tense, as it was now in the hands of the leader, the librarian needed to hurry, as the mind transfer should be done and completed before the heart gets shielded, meaning that they needed to free the protagonist before everything becomes frozen. Just like that, the strong one found himself in a distorted location that he immediately recognized as the subconscious of the boy. His mind seemed in a pitiful state, making the leader theorize that this was due to the effect of the dead star. But just as he was about to make his way to find the boy, something suddenly appeared behind him. The giant monster then proceeded to attack the man, who simply summoned his weapon before quickly dicing the creature that was left as a pile of shredded flesh. The leader, who realized that these creatures were the fruit of the dead star, pointed out how weak they were and how easy they were to kill, when suddenly the hand he just got off began to move, and just like that the man found himself getting attacked from all directions by horrifying monsters, making him realize that he had spoken too hastily. The chief then began to pray for the boy to last until he arrived. Meanwhile, our hero had to deal with his fair share of trouble as well. Seeing how one of the monsters was about to attack, he quickly moved out of the way in order to avoid a devastating claw. Our hero then used the second hit to launch himself into the ceiling. Ha-on-bith then began to concentrate his energy into his fist before unleashing a devastating attack. With the two monsters down, the young man desperately tried to regain his breath, only to notice something alarming as more of the creatures were beginning to spawn. Upon seeing this, Ha-on-bith was left confused, as slaying one of the beasts would usually be enough for him to wake up and end the nightmare. Pain was coursing through his entire body, but despite the hardships, he decided to keep on fighting in order to survive and escape. When suddenly someone asked him about his desire to go out, claiming that there was nothing for him there, the entity suggested to spend time together and have fun. Our hero immediately recognized it as the parasite inside his heart. That star proposed to destroy some cities of the young man's choosing, claiming that it would be fun, only for the protagonist to claim that he wasn't fond of destruction and that he needed to escape. It then reminded him of the bully who harassed him every day and took his anger out on him for no reason, proposing to terminate him and the rest of the harassers while his host peacefully enjoys the butchery. Ha-on-bith claimed that the parasite was just talking nonsense and threatened to take his life if he didn't let him escape. This greatly saddened the entity. It then began to act as if trying to show no hostility. The one it just slammed onto the ceiling was being hurtful. According to the dead star, the both of them were the same person, and yet his other half wanted to take his life. Thus it angrily dared him to do so before throwing him away. The boy quickly held on to something, allowing him to escape a lethal fall, but due to the exhaustion and the injuries, he had a hard time holding on. The gun then pointed out how its host was in pain and how he only had to make peace with it for it to stop the torment. But the hero boldly claimed that the training he endured here was much more hellish, earning him another slam onto the wall. The dead star urged this one to stop being irritating and act all high and mighty, seeing how he was but a nobody in the outside world as it kept on torturing him. The entity was particularly annoyed by the fact that its host couldn't comprehend the truth. Ha-on-Bith pointed out how low the parasite must think of him, seeing how he had the same mindset about himself until recently, and seeing how everyone treated him with pity and tried to help him, he couldn't help but see himself as more than a pot of uselessness. Yet after going through a hellish training with individuals that didn't consider him pathetic and helpless, the boy realized the error in his ways. With that being said, our hero began to channel his energy and claimed that others' opinions don't determine his reality. And with that being said, he reinforced himself with inner energy, channeling all of his power into one fist, before punching the entity and claiming that at his best, he could achieve something like the rest. At first, the attack seemed effective, only for the creature to change forms and brutally stomp the hero into the ground, marking the little strength he obtained from training. According to the entity, the skills of its host were limited and that he only had to accept him in order to escape his misery. But the boy claimed that such matters became trivial, as he would keep on fighting regardless of his weakness after realizing that his persistence would surely allow him to achieve something. With that being said, the young man began to gather the dark energy, claiming that the dead star shall never trick him ever again, before summoning its weapon form into his hand, and shooting the entity with it while being more determined than ever to stay in control. After the powerful array of darkness, the giant monster was finally gone, and with that, our hero fell to his knees, as the exhausted one desperately tried to retake his breath, thinking that the agony had ended. He began to look for a way out, only to be suddenly grabbed by numerous white hands coming from the ground. This left him baffled as the creatures were still coming despite the disappearance of the parasite. All that Ha-on-Bith had to do was get rid of the monsters and run towards freedom, and so, while clinging on to hope and struggling for his life, a shadow technique had been activated. Dimension Cut had been unleashed, slashing the creatures to bits and making them all disappear. With that being said, our hero finally collapsed. Yet before he could hit the ground, someone held him by the hand. The leader who caught his junior at the last minute apologized for not arriving sooner. Upon seeing the man in front of him, the confused boy struggled to find the right words to apologize, only to find himself getting hugged and praised for lasting so long. Ha-on-Bith tried to apologize once again. As ice began to surround them, the chief pointed out how the young man must have had a hard time. He expressed how proud he was of him for fighting on despite the hellish hardships. And so, the man asked the boy to close his eyes and let him worry about the rest. As tears began to fill the eyes of the teenager, the chief affirmed to him that once he wakes up, all of his worries would have been washed away.